Welcome to the parlor. And can I just start by asking, how did I get so lucky to have viewers like you, like John and Geraldine Cooper, who out of the goodness of their own heart sent me this as part of the preseason tour merchandise package, which includes a hoodie and a hat and a toque. That's what we call it here in Canada, a toque, by the way, just out of the goodness of their heart. And sitting on the stoop right next to that package was this, the claret version of the 40th anniversary flag from Andrew Mosley. Just sent it to me because they love the show. I can't thank you enough. This is ridiculous. I'm not worthy. And especially because this has been a brutal international window. The absence of Premier League football, the injuries, which I will update you on because there have been some updates. And I need to talk about this weird vibe that's hovering around Aston Villa right now. Like, who is making the football decisions right now? We'll talk about that and much, much more as we provide the pre-Leeds show. Before we get into the football, this little Holy Trinity show of mine has somehow managed to earn a Football Content Awards nomination under Best Premier League Podcast, which is surreal and unbelievable that some lad from Canada who loves the Villa can in 1 year slap a show together and be up against a whole bunch of other shows that have been around for a very, very long time. And my good friends, the Up the Villa podcast lads just down the YouTube hallway, are up for Best New Show. This is incredible, and I'd love to see us rattle the Sky 6 in the Content Awards space because, let's be honest, a lot of these shows have been around for a while, and many of them are with the bigger clubs. So I've included a link to the voting down below in the description. Could you help your Villa content creators out and have a say? Because 50% of the award is determined by voting, the other 50% through a panel that has been assembled. Up the mighty Villa content. So based on everything I've read, Boubacar Kamara with a relatively high degree sprained medial collateral ligament, but I think we've dodged a bullet here because I'll always take a sprain or a strain, even a serious one, over a tear or a rupture, and we'll always take an MCL injury over an ACL injury because the recovery time is like night and day. And some of the reports said he was already in Qatar at this world-class facility where they work specifically on these issues. And so he's already on the road to recovery, which actually puts him still in contention, apparently, for the World Cup. But that would mean that there won't be any Premiership football with Aston Villa until at least after the World Cup. But still, I think we have reasons to be thankful that this injury wasn't more serious. Slightly better news for Luca Dean because initially it was a stress fracture diagnosis in his right ankle and it was supposed to be 7 weeks out. Well, that's now been reduced to about 2 or 3 weeks and he's already burned a week of those. So probably mid-October. That doesn't help for the two monstrous games in front of us with Leeds and Nottingham Forest. But again, feels like we dodged a bullet. So the question then becomes who fills in for the injured players? And for me and Boubacar Kamara, I think it's Leander Dendoncker, even more so than Douglas Luiz. I mean, the guy could play center back. He could play as a 6 or an 8, but 6 is the right and I think preferred position for him. He's a big guy. And that actually is the perfect scenario. The defensive solidity and experience there. I think Luiz should be playing as one of the 8s. It'll probably be McGinn as the other one. And then I'd like to see Jacob Ramsey play on the left side of the front three, but it'll be Coutinho. Regardless, I'm really curious to see whether Leander Dendoncker gets in and then whether he stays in. Now, the left back situation feels slightly more muddy to me because I simply do not see a way in this universe that Ludwig Augustinsson is going to play for Aston Villa. I don't know why that is. It's just a sense that I have. I think Ashley Young will play at left back and they'll figure something else out for right back. And I'm sorry, Freddie Gilbert fans, it ain't going to be Freddie. Just a feeling I have again. I think at this stage of the season, with the importance of these games, they're not suddenly platooning this guy in to save the right back position until Matty Cash come back. In fact, I think it's more likely that we see Ezri Konsa or Callum Chambers playing as a right back, or even playing 3 center backs and having 2 wing backs pushed a little higher up the park. But as we know with this technical staff, they do not experiment. They don't like the nouveau changes, and they'll go with a steady as she goes 4 at the back. But don't hold your breath on Augustinson or Gilbert. Leeds United at Elland Road is always going to be a tricky contest, even without Jesse Marsch on the sideline because he's suspended, so we won't get to see his alarmingly tight grey acid wash jeans up close and personal. But we know that this young Leeds team will press. They will press relentlessly. And that leads to an interesting decision on who plays next to Tyrone Mings at center back, because is Ezri Konsa best equipped to deal with that press and the ability to play a good outball, or will it be a more savvy Jan Benderak? Last year, it was Callum Chambers who played alongside Mings, and he did very well in that game and actually scored a worldie of a goal to make it 3-0. But it's going to be a tricky affair. Last year, it was finely balanced until Phil Coutinho scored the first goal, and then that played into Villa's hand. Matty Cash made it 2-0, and that was Jesse Marsch's first game in charge, ironically, at Elland Road. But if Villa win, not only do they leapfrog Leeds, but they actually move into a pretty comfortable spot in mid-table. There is a lot riding on this. I was actually quite fortunate to watch a young Brendan Aronson quite a bit at Philadelphia Union of Major League Soccer, and Tyler Adams at New York Red Bulls. Both are legit footballers, and they'll know exactly what Jesse Marsch wants, and he'll know what he wants out of them. And I've said this on the show before. I highly rate Jesse Marsch, an incredibly intelligent and bright and energetic, effervescent human being who's obviously extremely brave, because not a lot of American coaches have ventured into foreign lands and had success. You remember the disastrous appointment of Bob Bradley at Swansea? And keeping in mind that Marsch had to follow one of the most revered managers, the professor, one of the most beloved characters in the game of all time, Marcelo Bielsa. When he first started his career in Major League Soccer, Marsch moved to Montreal, so immediately he learned French. Then later he moves to Austria and learns German, and now he's got the most difficult assignment of all. He's moved to Leeds, and he has to learn Yorkshire. So this whole Leeds United States of America thing, or is it New Yorkshire, is very fascinating to me, because I've often wondered, where are all the high-level American coaches? Will there be North American coaches on the sidelines in the Premier League? Well, there is one now, and I'm very curious to see how things unfold at Elland Road. Just not this week. Here's how I think Steven Gerrard will go. Not what I want or what I think, but how I think Steven Gerrard will line up at Leeds. Now, there are many variables to this back line because of the injuries, and I simply cannot see how a manager who is under some fire at a game that's kind of winnable would hand somebody a shirt for the very first time. I just can't see that. I think he's going to stick with what he knows, and he knows Ashley Young. Mings and Konsa have come off a clean sheet against Southampton and have developed a partnership and are stable together. And Callum Chambers had a good game at Elland Road last year. He can play at right back, not pacey, but he's steady and he could play there. Maybe Jan Benderak does come into this game and replace Ezri Konsa there, and maybe Konsa plays right back. But I simply do not believe that he would hand the shirt to either Ludwig Augustinsson or Freddie Gilbert, because they haven't featured for him before, and I just don't see how he can trust somebody under those circumstances. In midfield, because Dan Donker did have some time in the Southampton game, I think he does get the start. Could Luiz play there? Of course he could. We've seen him play there. Could Luiz play in the spot here shown as Jacob Ramsey? Yes, he could play there as well, but I don't think that Villa then have the extra thrust from midfield if Jacob Ramsey is not starting here, and he's not going to play in Phil Coutinho's place, I don't think. Coutinho had a good game at Elland Road as well last year, scored the opening goal. Bailey provides danger and would be a great counterattacking option if Villa were in a position to go ahead. So this is what my gut tells me that Steven Gerrard will do on Sunday. Now, as for the Villa, are you like me in thinking, who are we? Where are we? And most importantly, who gets the ultimate decision on footballing matters? Because it's not clear to me. Up until pre-season in the summer, I would have said Steven Gerrard. But when they lost that first game of the year to Bournemouth the way they did, I think that loss ruffled some feathers. And if you're the owners, you're looking around, you're going, well, we spent a lot of money to change managers and bring in Gerrard, his big staff, then the players he wanted, in the middle of also a ground redesign project, which, by the way, let's be honest, that is as much about timing for the 2028 Euro tournament as it is about Aston Villa. You only have a small window to cash in on the potential infrastructure windfall that will surround that tournament. Things like roads and rails, all that is going to be happening in conjunction with ground expansion. So they kind of have to do that right now. But the point is, they've spent some scratch, and I don't think they are seeing progression. If you're Sawiris or Edens, and you just look at the Morgan Sanson transfer, and you see a player who did not feature under either of the managers at the helm, and that's coming up on 2 years now in January, and you may just have to give him away or loan him off, are you not asking questions there? And what about the summer recruitment? Emi Buendia is the club's record signing still. Then there's Leon Bailey and Danny Ings. Are any of those three ever present? Well, no, 2 of the 3 aren't even starting. More questions. Now, Diego Carlos and Boubacar Kamara were shrewd signings, in my opinion. Not a lot up front, and yes, big salaries, but they addressed areas of concern within the squad. But ever since the end of last season, through preseason, and even through the summer transfer window, the manager himself was saying, we need to strengthen in the midfield area. And if you're a club that has designs on the top 6 and have ambition, is Leander Dendoncker the first name you think about in terms of strengthening in that position? That's no disrespect to the Belgian, because I think that's a shrewd right now type signing, Premier League experience, and that may turn out to be actually a really good move, but that doesn't fit any of the profile that has occurred over the last 2 years. You know what that signing tells me? That signing tells me I don't trust you and I don't trust you, and we're not going to open the wallet and throw tons of money at this. We want to be okay for right now, and let's see what happens. The owners have also invested a mittful into youth academy and development, not just on the players themselves, but the support around the players, the staff, the facilities. And I haven't seen Cam Archer play yet this year. Big Tim and Kane Kessler-Hayden, they were loaned out, even though many did feel that they were ripe and ready. But as we know, under fire managers do not play kids. And perhaps the best prospect of them all, Carney Chukwuemeka, was sold, yes, for a profit, but they're still asking questions. I mean, they must be looking around and thinking, we are underwhelmed with what is happening right now. And even more importantly, the aesthetics of the football on the pitch have been really, really drab this year. This is a really critical question. Who can the owners trust with the footballing decisions? Because they're not football people, which is a good thing, because it means they're less likely to meddle, even though Wes Edens is very sports savvy. But basketball in America is completely different than football in England. And I've noticed over the last 10 years, when foreign owners come in and buy Premier League clubs, there is this kind of crazy period they go through. Exhibit A is Chelsea's new American owner, who's done some kind of odd things. When Sawiris and Edens first arrived, they handed the entire footballing keys to the kingdom to Suso. And based on his transfer business, I think they were absolutely correct to not renew their sporting director's contract at the time. That following summer, Dean Smith, as Johan Lange was coming in the door, had a pretty heavy hand in the decision-making, because he brought in Ollie Watkins, Ezri Konsa, Matty Cash, and Emi Martinez, all very good signings that season. And he had a pretty big stake in those decisions. But a year later, with a couple of strange technical staff departures, including John Terry, 3 new technical people coming in right at the end of preseason, the aforementioned summer signings of Buendia, Bailey, and Ings, and all those weird rumors connecting Aston Villa to James Ward-Prowse and Emile Smith-Rowe. I mean, to this day, I still don't know where the buck stops in terms of who ultimately makes the footballing decisions. This brings us back to Christian Purslow, the CEO who was also a minority shareholder, which brings up some interesting questions. I mean, on one hand, you'd think a guy who has skin in the game would want to make absolutely sure he's getting everything right. But on the other, you could argue he might just be investing in his own job security. But one thing that has to be made absolutely plain is that Christian Purslow is not now, nor has ever been, a football guy. He might have worked in footballing environments like at Liverpool and Chelsea, but at the very core, he is not a football-savvy individual, nor has ever been. High credentials? Yes. Went to Harvard. He's had some good postings. He is an executive, a polished sales guy. Villa's football department, to me, is all over the shop. Too much is dependent on the next manager through the door. And so what you get is you get a reactive football club, not a proactive football club, but a reactive one. And I want Aston Villa to be a proactive football club. One thing I've seen an awful lot in many clubs around the world, and it doesn't work, is when the same person is in fact in charge of both the footballing and the commercial operations. I don't want my football people talking about marketing and partnerships, and I don't want my commercial people wondering what the best formation is with the roster that you have. Those are two separate silos, and I've seen other clubs who have employed this notion of having those two people, the heads of those two departments, report directly to the owners or the chair people, which means that this old-fashioned notion of a CEO has to either be reimagined or eliminated, quite frankly. And I guess those kinds of decisions depend entirely upon how hands-on the owners are or how hands-on they want to be. Because Nassif Sawiris is based in London and because he's the chairman of our club, it only makes sense then that the two heads of those silos would report directly to him, the head of football and the head of commercial and business. And just with head of commercial and business, have you ever heard the name Nicola Ibbotson before associated with Aston Villa? I hadn't. Apparently, she's our chief commercial officer and has been for almost 4 years at our club. And before that, she spent almost 3 years in a similar role at Chelsea. And before that, 2 years in sponsorship with Manchester United. This is a highly credentialed human being. Now, would you have a problem with this human being at the very top of the business and commercial side of our club, reporting directly to the owner chairman, Nassif Sawiris? I wouldn't have a problem with that. Would a move like that reflect a modern, progressive, forward-thinking, and proactive football club? Why, I think it would. Because, my friend, the days of the old boys club are dying. So then you need to find a head of all things football technical, philosophy, first team, scouting, recruitment, academy, all of it. And ideally, the process starts with philosophy, and hopefully there's some kind of methodology to determining why or how you're going to play the way you're going to play. And maybe you tap in a little bit to Aston Villa's history. Maybe you go through a similar exercise like the one we did on the logo redesign show, where you explore some of the attributes of the community that you serve, and you develop the overarching philosophy, which becomes part of your identity and your brand, really. A couple of great examples, Chivas de Guadalajara and Athletic Bilbao. Chivas only plays Mexican players. They don't recruit foreigners. And if you're not from Basque Country, you're not playing for Athletic Bilbao, which I always found incredibly fascinating because you're actually taking something away from the potential of your competition because you're playing these players, but this is part of their identities. It's part of their history. Now, I'm not suggesting Aston Villa goes to that extreme level, but you kind of know what I'm saying. It's part of your brand, your identity. And then ultimately, if you determine that philosophy, you find other clubs that have a similar playing philosophy and you partner with them, you sister with them, you loan your young players to them, maybe you recruit players from them, and maybe your next coach understands those systems and comes from those clubs because it's linear. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing in that playing philosophy. Not to mention, you could also find players because you know the specific attributes that are required to play in those systems, rather than what's happening right now, which is manager comes in, recruits players that he's already worked with before. That doesn't work, blow it up. New manager comes in, new system, works with players that he's worked with before. That doesn't work. And Steven Gerrard is 2 unsuccessful weekends away from potentially being gone, and we're blowing it up again. That is not sustainable. Villa isn't the only club that has perpetuated this pattern of doomed behavior through managerial hire after managerial hire, and then surrounding those people with players that they're familiar with, only for it to not work out. And the great example is Chelsea, who brought in Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang because of his past relationship with Thomas Tuchel at Dortmund, only to then fire Thomas Tuchel and now leave Graham Potter stuck with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. And I get that it's a scary prospect to turn so much responsibility over to one person at the top of the footballing pyramid within your club to make all the big philosophical decisions and build from there. And that's why I think that person must come from within the Premier League, because it's such a unique league, the greatest in the world, and you need to understand it intimately. And this is one of the reasons why I'm very underwhelmed by Johan Lange right now. I know at the time it was a trendy hipster type hire, but I have not seen the analytic or data-driven approach yield players who are appreciating in value. In fact, it seems like it's the other way around. We're buying players that are depreciating in value, and you don't need a data analytics person to do that. I just have this weird feeling that the owners are up to something here. I think they're doing a thorough evaluation and examination of their key people, because you don't get to be multi-billionaires without reflection and asking an awful lot of questions. You don't get there by neglecting your business. And that might explain some of the mixed messaging we've been hearing over the last few weeks and months. Douglas Luiz is staying. He's going to sign a new contract. Douglas Luiz is leaving for Arsenal. No, he's staying again, and he's probably going to end up leaving for free. Steven Gerrard admitting after Arsenal that he felt under fire. Why did he say that? He wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. Is that because communication has changed with his hierarchy? Christian Purslow never appears anywhere unless there is a shiny, exciting new thing to be unveiled. And Johan Lange, I don't know what he does. I don't know if he has any autonomy whatsoever, or if he's just a yes man with a data analyst. The problem is, it is the decision makers that probably need to change here. Because otherwise, okay, Steven Gerrard loses the next 2 games, he's out. There's Mauricio Pochettino sitting there waiting to come back to the Premier League. He wants to, apparently. Other clubs want to talk to him as well. But you're still in the same situation. New manager comes in, brings in his people, and the cycle of reactiveness continues, rather than let's change it here. Let's have a philosophy here, and this philosophy dictates everything. And if that philosophy says Pochettino is exactly the type of manager playing the exact style of football we need to play, fine. You can't buy this through the Holy Trinity show and the Aston Villa online shop, but you can buy the third kit. And if you're gonna pull the trigger, because all the third kit range is beautiful, use the link in the description below and you'll be helping the show out, as you will be if you vote for us at the Football Content Awards. That link is also in the description. Until post Leeds, be well, enjoy the sunshine, and as always, up the mighty Villa.